The CEO casually ordered his steak in German, yet froze in shock when the waitress slipped him a handwritten note. "They're secretly filming you right now." Under the golden chandeliers of Lernadan, the light danced across Ethan Blackwell's sharp jawline. He leaned back in his chair, confident, composed, savoring the power of the moment.
Leave now.
At 33, he ruled every room he entered. 6'2" of control and precision, wrapped in an Armani suit that cost more than most people's rent. His steel-grey eyes swept the restaurant's elite cold, unreadable. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly in German, his voice carrying the confidence of a man who built an empire from nothing. "Duskin, the business will be very profitable." The two German investors nodded, impressed. Ethan knew how to play this game. Language was leverage, politeness was power, control was everything. Then she appeared. The waitress, auburn hair tied back, green eyes calm but alert. Her movements elegant, practiced, quiet. Ethan barely looked up. To him, service staff were part of the decor, invisible, like the chandeliers or the paintings on the wall. "I'll have the ribeye steak," he said without glancing up, scrolling through stock prices on his phone. "Medium rare, truffle sauce. A perfect order for a perfect night." But what happened next shattered it all. The waitress didn't stammer, didn't reach for a translation app. Instead, she wrote something quickly, folded the paper once, and placed it beside his water glass, smooth, subtle, invisible. No one else noticed. Ethan's fingers found the note almost by instinct. He kept his eyes on the phone, but every sense in his body went alert. The paper wasn't cheap. It was fine stock, deliberate. He unfolded it under the table. And read, "You're being filmed. The man with the blue tie, 2 tables away." Ice. That's what it felt like, running through his veins. He glanced up just once and met her eyes. And what he saw there took his breath away. Intelligence. Sharp, precise, calculating. And beneath it, something human. A warning. Real concern. Ethan forced himself to stay calm, pretending to talk about the wine list. Without turning his head, he looked toward the table she'd marked. A man in his 40s, blue silk tie, phone angled just so. Industrial espionage. Ethan recognized it instantly. Someone wanted his secrets, the next big acquisition, the one no one was supposed to know about until tomorrow. The waitress moved on, taking his guests' orders. Professional, effortless. But Ethan saw how she shifted her stance, just enough to block the man's camera. She was protecting him. But why? Her accent was perfect German, but not native educated. Vienna, perhaps. Her posture was wrong for a waitress. Too straight, too confident. Her hands soft, manicured, not worn from labor. And those eyes, there was power in them. The kind that comes from knowing secrets. "Who are you?" he murmured under his breath. She finished taking orders. "Danke schön," she said, but lingered just a second longer, long enough to meet his gaze again. He saw it then. There was a story behind her professionalism, and Ethan Blackwell wanted to know it. He smiled faintly. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said in English. "I need to make a quick call." He stood, note in hand, and walked toward the corridor. Not to call anyone, but to watch. From the shadows, he studied her. The mysterious waitress moved like a dancer, graceful, efficient, almost military. When she thought no one was watching, her smile vanished, replaced by something colder. Guarded, haunted. She wasn't just working here. She was hiding, running from something, or someone. Ethan was certain of it. She wasn't an ordinary waitress. His phone buzzed. A message from his head of security, Logan Pierce. Intercepted attempt to bug your table tonight. We've handled it. Ethan's pulse spiked. She'd been right. Someone had tried to record him. But how did she know? And why warn him? He returned to his table, face calm, eyes unreadable. His guests were busy discussing market projections, oblivious to the storm brewing inside him. The ribeye arrived perfect, as always, but Ethan barely tasted it. Every time she passed by, his eyes followed. The mysterious waitress who'd just saved his empire. When she came to refill his glass, he spoke quietly, just for her. "Excuse me," he murmured in English. "Thank you for the recommendation." Her green eyes lifted to meet his. A soft smile touched her lips. "Just doing my job, sir." But there was something behind that smile, a quiet understanding. A secret. "I'm Ethan," he said. He caught her wrist gently, not enough to alarm her, but enough to make her pause. Her skin was warm, soft, but there was a faint scar running across her palm. Another mystery. "Lila," she replied, freeing her hand slowly. "Enjoy your dinner, Mr. Blackwell." She knew his name. She'd known from the moment she walked up to his table. As she walked away, Ethan sat frozen in thought. In 33 years, no one had ever surprised him like this. No one had ever protected him without wanting something in return. He should have dismissed her from his mind. But he couldn't. Through the rest of dinner, he found himself stealing glances at her, watching how she straightened a crooked picture frame, how she gently corrected a young server's posture, how she recognized a rare wine vintage without hesitation. No ordinary waitress would notice those things. "Ethan," one of his guests prompted, "your thoughts on the European expansion?" He blinked. "Right. Of course." But half his mind stayed on her. Later that night, when the investors had gone, Ethan made an unusual decision. He stayed. Usually, he would leave immediately, a chauffeur waiting, scheduled precise to the minute. But not tonight. He waited until she was clearing tables, then walked back toward her section. She didn't look up. "We're closed to new diners." "I'm not here for dinner," he said. "I'm here for answers." Slowly, she straightened, her professional mask slipping just slightly. "I'm not sure what you mean, Mr. Blackwell." "You saved me from corporate espionage," he said quietly. "You speak German like you studied in Vienna. You carry yourself like someone who's led companies, not served in them." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "So I'll ask again. Who are you really, Lila?" For a long moment, silence filled the restaurant. The chandeliers flickered softly overhead. Every other employee was gone. Her jaw tightened. "Finally," she whispered, "someone who learned the hard way, that powerful men can't be trusted." Ethan's expression softened. Something in her voice hit deeper than logic. "And someone," she added, "who's trying very hard to stay invisible." "From who?" he asked. Every protective instinct inside him woke up like fire. She looked at him, studying, calculating, deciding how much truth to risk. "From people who would do anything to keep me from reclaiming what was stolen." Ethan understood then she wasn't just hiding. She was surviving. The next evening, Ethan Blackwell returned to Leonadan. No business meeting this time, only curiosity. He told himself it was to confirm the security breach was handled. But that was a lie. He wanted to see her. Lila was there, training a new waiter. Her tone was calm, precise, patient. "The 2018 Chassagna Montrachet should be served at 55 degrees, she said softly. If a customer questions the vintage, explain the harvest. Burgundy's late rains made it exceptional. Ethan watched from the corner. Her knowledge was expert level, her authority natural. She moved through the room like she owned it, not a waitress, a leader in disguise. When she finally noticed him, her professional mask slipped back into place. "Mr. Blackwell," she said, "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "Your German pronunciation," he said without preamble. "It's Viennese. Old money." Her composure wavered. For just a second, panic flashed in her eyes. "I studied abroad," she said carefully. "Where?" Ethan pressed. "Because I spent 2 years in Vienna myself. MBA, Wirtschaftsuniversität. I'd know that accent anywhere. It's not learned. It's native." Lila glanced around the dining room, scanning exits, gauging privacy. It was instinctive, professional, the reflex of someone who's been hunted. "You're very observant for a customer," she said finally. "You're very evasive for a waitress," Ethan countered. He softened his tone. "Look, I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable, but yesterday you saved me. You didn't have to. I owe you." Lila laughed, low, bitter, humorless. "Trust me, Mr. Blackwell, you don't owe me anything. In fact, you'd be better off forgetting we ever met." "Why?" Ethan asked. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" The question hung between them like static. Lila hesitated, then sighed as if choosing between fear and faith. "The kind of trouble that destroys everything it touches," she said quietly. "The kind that follows you across oceans, through new names, until there's nowhere left to run." A chill went through Ethan's chest. He knew danger. He could smell it. "What happened to you?" he asked softly. Before she could answer, Mr. Bennett, the restaurant manager, approached. "Lila, table 6 is asking about wine pairings." Her professional smile snapped back instantly. "Of course, Mr. Bennett." Ethan noticed her jaw tighten, a flash of irritation she quickly buried. She turned to leave, but he caught her hand. "When do you get off work?" he asked. "Mr. Blackwell." "Ethan," he corrected, voice low. "And it's not what you think. I just want to help." Her green eyes searched his face, probing for deceit, for ego, for weakness. "Why?" she finally asked. It was a fair question. And for once, Ethan didn't have a prepared answer. He had money, power, control. He didn't need entanglements. He avoided them. But this woman, she'd risked everything for a stranger. "Because yesterday," he said, "you trusted me enough to warn me about danger. Maybe it's time someone returned the favor." Lila studied him for a long moment, then nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "I finish at 11, she said. "There's a coffee shop on 42nd Street, Midnight Grounds. It's quiet." Ethan smiled, small, genuine. "I'll be there." That night, at 10:45, Ethan Blackwell sat in a dim corner booth at Midnight Grounds, a forgotten coffee shop that smelled of rain and nostalgia. At 11:15, Lila Carter walked in. She'd changed out of her uniform jeans, a grey sweater. Her hair loose now, soft curls framing her face. She looked younger, and somehow more fragile. "Thank you for waiting," she said softly, sliding into the booth. "Thank you for coming," Ethan replied, signaling for 2 coffees. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," she admitted. "This goes against every survival instinct I've built for 2 years." 2 years, Ethan repeated quietly. "Is that how long you've been running?" Lila smiled sadly. "Running implies I have somewhere to go. I've been hiding." Ethan leaned forward, tone gentle but firm. "From who?" She was silent for a long time. The coffee arrived, steam curled between them like a veil. "Finally," she whispered, "from my former fiancé, from his family, from people who'd kill to keep certain truths buried." Ethan froze. "Kill?" She met his eyes, unflinching. "You asked who I really am," she said quietly. "My name is Lila Carter. 3 years ago, I was the heir to a textile empire worth $800 million. My family built the Carter textile empire," Lila said softly. "Founded in Vienna, expanded across Europe. By 27, I was set to inherit everything. Factories, brands, foundations, all of it." Her voice trembled just slightly. "Not from weakness, from restraint. I studied at Oxford. Graduated top of my class. But in that world, education means nothing compared to bloodlines." Ethan listened silently, his eyes fixed on hers. "That's when I met Ryan Hale." She spoke the name with quiet venom. "The son of a powerful Austrian banking family. Charming, brilliant, and as it turned out, utterly ruthless. They'd met at a charity gala. He made her laugh. He made her believe in partnership, in shared legacy. Within a year, they were engaged. But then, the money began disappearing. Her hands tightened around her coffee cup. $50 million. Gone. My signature was on every document. Digital authorizations, transfer requests, all perfectly forged. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Framed you?" "Yes," she whispered. "By the time I discovered the truth, it was too late. The board called an emergency meeting. My accounts were frozen. The press labeled me a criminal before I even knew what had happened." She looked away, eyes glistening, but no tears fell. "And Ryan?" Ethan asked quietly. "He disappeared, then resurfaced. Married to my cousin, Chloe Hale." Ethan exhaled sharply. "That's cold." Lila gave a small, bitter laugh. "Chloe was my best friend growing up. We were inseparable. She knew everything, and she still helped him destroy me." Silence filled the air, heavy, thick. Even the hum of the coffee machine faded into the background. "What did you do?" Ethan asked. "I ran." The word was a whisper, fragile yet defiant. "I sold what little jewelry I had left, used a contact in Prague to get fake papers. New name, new life." Her gaze hardened. "I worked as a translator, then as a waitress. No social media, no bank cards, just surviving. Until that night." "The dinner?" Ethan said. She nodded slowly. "When I saw the man filming you, I recognized the pattern, the angle of the phone, the way he tilted it. That's what they used on me during my trial-staged videos, edited evidence. I couldn't let it happen to someone else." Ethan felt something stir in his chest. Admiration. And something deeper, an ache he didn't expect. "You risked exposing yourself," he said. "For a stranger." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "You reminded me of what I used to be before everything fell apart. Confident, certain, unshakable." Ethan leaned forward. "You still are." Lila shook her head slowly. "No, Ethan, I'm a ghost wearing a borrowed name. If they find out I'm alive." Her voice faltered. "They'll finish what they started." Ethan's tone dropped lower, quiet, deliberate. "They won't," she frowned. "You can't know that. I make it my business to protect what matters," he said simply. "And right now, that's you." Lila stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or believe him. Her eyes searched for motive, found none. "You barely know me." "Then let me fix that," Ethan said softly. "Let me help you take your life back." Her breath caught. No one had said words like that to her in years. "I don't need saving," she murmured. "I know," he replied, "but you deserve justice." Hours passed like minutes. She told him about Vienna, about the auction of her family estate, about Eleanor Carter, her grandmother, the only one who believed she was innocent, how Eleanor mortgaged everything to help her escape, and how, 6 months later, Eleanor died alone, believing her granddaughter had vanished forever. When Lila finished, she looked exhausted, but lighter. Like the truth itself had freed her, even for a moment. Ethan studied her face, the quiet strength, the broken pride, the courage hidden behind every word. He reached across the table, his hand brushed hers gently, respectfully. "I'm sorry," he said, and somehow those 2 words sounded like a vow. Lila didn't pull away. She didn't speak either. For a long time, they just sat there, 2 people haunted by power and loss, finding unexpected calm in each other's silence. When she finally stood to leave, Ethan rose too. "I'll walk you home," he said. "You don't have to." "I know," he interrupted softly. "But I want to." She hesitated, then nodded. The rain had started again. The streets shimmered under neon reflections. They walked in silence, their footsteps echoing softly against wet pavement. At her corner, Lila stopped. Her small apartment building loomed above them, dark and quiet. "Thank you," she said, "for listening, for not judging." Ethan smiled faintly. "For surviving," he said. "Not everyone could have done what you did." She looked at him, eyes soft but steady. "I've spent 2 years trying not to be found. If you keep digging into this, Ethan, you'll make yourself a target too." He stepped closer, the rain misting around them. "Then I guess I'll stop hiding too." She drew a shaky breath. A small laugh escaped her, tired but real. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" "Never have," he said, voice low, and for the first time she believed him. When she turned to go, he said quietly, "Good night, Lila." She looked back once, and for just a moment her guarded mask dropped, revealing warmth, gratitude, and something dangerously close to hope. Then she disappeared into the dark hallway. Ethan stood in the rain for a long time, his suit soaked, his heartbeat loud in the silence. He knew 2 things for certain. First, he'd just met the most extraordinary woman of his life, and second, whatever haunted her was coming for him too. Morning broke with rain streaking across the glass walls of Ethan Blackwell's penthouse. He hadn't slept. Her story kept replaying every lie, every betrayal, every quiet act of courage. He stood by the window, coffee untouched, watching the skyline. New York looked calm. But beneath that calm, he felt movement. Danger. He turned as Logan Pierce, head of security, entered. "Talk," Ethan said. Logan dropped a tablet on the marble counter. "Background check on Ryan Hale. You were right. He's clean on paper, too clean. We found shell companies in Zurich, Monaco, and Dubai, all tied to a holding group that used to belong to Carter Textiles." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He's been laundering the stolen money." "Looks that way." Logan hesitated. "There's more. Someone hacked your private servers at 3A. Used a VPN traced back to Vienna." Ethan exhaled slowly. "They're watching me now. Do you want to go public with this?" Ethan shook his head. "No, not yet. If I go loud, they'll bury her deeper. We do this quietly." He stared at the city below. Pull everything we have on Hale Finance Group, follow the money trail, offshore accounts, dummy LLCs, anything that touches Habsburg-era assets. Logan nodded. And the girl? Ethan turned. Her name is Lila. Keep her out of this. No one touches her. That night, Ethan drove through the city rain to the small diner where she worked double shifts. He sat at the corner booth, waiting. She noticed him. The moment he walked in, the subtle stiffening of her shoulders gave her away. Still, she approached calmly. You shouldn't be here, she said quietly. Neither should you, he replied. Lila sighed. Ethan, I told you this isn't your fight. He leaned forward. You told me what they took from you. You never told me what you're afraid they'll do next. She hesitated, then sat opposite him. Her hands trembled, just slightly. Ryan's not just after money. He's cleaning history. If the forged documents ever surface, he goes to prison. So he's destroying every trace, servers, records, people. People, Ethan repeated. She looked at him, eyes wet. They killed one of my father's accountants, made it look like an accident. Then a lawyer in Zurich disappeared. They'll come for me next. Ethan's voice dropped. Not if I find them first. Lila shook her head. You don't understand. This isn't a boardroom battle. These are men who grew up manipulating governments. You can't fight them. Ethan gave a small, humorless smile. Watch me. Hours later, back at Blackwell Industries, the war began. In a dark operations room lined with monitors, Ethan and Logan watched code scroll across the screens as their cybersecurity team traced transactions in real time. Found a transfer, one analyst said. 25 million USD routed through Helios Trust Limited ownership, masked by Nathan Cole. Ethan's head snapped up. Cole? My CFO? Your friend, Logan confirmed. He's the one facilitating the cleanups. Ethan's chest went cold. Nathan Cole had been with him since the first startup, the man who helped him build everything. Pull his access, now. Within seconds the systems locked, Nathan's credentials revoked, his communications rerouted. Ethan stared at the frozen line of code on the screen, Nathan's digital signature. The betrayal hurt more than he expected. The next day, Ethan called Lila. Meet me, he said. I found something. They met in a quiet park overlooking the river. The wind was cold, and she kept her coat tied tight. You were right, Ethan said. Ryan is laundering money through fronts, using my own company's infrastructure. And he's got help from someone I trusted. Lila's expression fell. Who? Nathan Cole. She froze. I remember that name. He was at our launch in Vienna. Ryan introduced him to my father. Then it goes back further than I thought. Ethan handed her a small drive, encrypted files from Nathan's office. I think it's your missing evidence. Lila's hands shook as she took it. Ethan, if this is real, we can prove I'm innocent. He nodded. And put them all in prison. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. You don't know what you've done, she whispered. They'll come for you too. He smiled softly. They already have. That night, as the city lights burned outside his office windows, Ethan stood alone beside his desk. The documents glowed on his screen, proof of every transfer, every forgery. And one name repeated through it all, Ryan Hale. He picked up his phone and called Logan. Get ready, he said. We go to war tomorrow. Dawn broke cold and silver over Manhattan. The skyline glittered like steel, sharp, distant, merciless. In the penthouse war room, screens came alive with encrypted feeds, data, accounts, digital ghosts of greed. Ethan Blackwell stood at the center, calm as the eye of a storm. He wore no tie, his sleeves rolled up. The man who once ruled through silence was now ready for war. Beside him, Lila Carter watched the chaos unfold. Every number flashing on those screens was a wound from her past. Every document, a scar, reborn as proof. "This is it," Logan said, checking his headset. "Interpol, Europol, and US Treasury are online. Once you give the word, every piece of evidence goes live simultaneously." Ethan nodded. "Operation Carter begins in 5. Lila turned toward him. "Are you sure about this?" He looked at her, and the tension in his eyes softened. "If we wait any longer, they'll erase you again." He paused. "I won't let that happen." Lila swallowed, emotion trembling beneath her calm. "You'll lose everything, Ethan. Your company. Your name. I already risked them," he said quietly. "For you." The room fell silent. Even the machines seemed to hold their breath. Vienna. Across the ocean, the first domino fell. Nathan Cole, Ethan's former CFO, stepped into his private office, unaware the walls were listening. Seconds later, his encrypted line pinged. "You've been compromised." Ryan Hale. Nathan froze. The phone vibrated again, this time from an unknown number. "You're done running, Nathan." Ethan Blackwell. At that moment, all of Nathan's monitors turned black. Then came the single word that would end him. "Upload." In Manhattan, the room erupted in motion. Every major outlet, from the Financial Times to Bloomberg, received mirrored data dumps. Millions of lines of evidence, wire transfers, shell accounts, video testimony. Every crime Ryan Hale ever committed, unleashed to the world. Lila stared in disbelief as her name cleared across the international wire. Carter, heiress, exonerated whistleblower, exposes global banking fraud. Her breath hitched. 2 years of exile. 1 night of redemption. But the moment of peace didn't last. Logan's voice cut through the air. "Sir, we've got movement. Hale's private jet just landed at JFK." Ethan's eyes hardened. "He's here." That evening, Leonidan Restaurant, the same place where it all began, stood silent and empty, reserved for one final meeting. Rain fell outside in slow sheets, catching the neon light like liquid glass. Ethan sat at his old table, a single glass of wine untouched, before him. When Ryan Hale entered, he didn't need to announce himself. The air grew colder just by his presence. "Well," Ryan drawled. "The American Lion and the Runaway Bride. What a reunion." Lila stood from the corner, her expression calm but burning with quiet fire. "You destroyed my family, my name, my life," she said. Her voice didn't shake. "Not anymore." Ryan smiled faintly. "And yet here you are, reborn as a martyr. How poetic." Ethan rose, stepping between them. "Poetic justice, maybe." Ryan's smirk faltered as Ethan tossed a small device onto the table, a blinking recorder. Their conversation already live-streaming to half the world. "You're finished," Ethan said. "Interpol's waiting outside." Ryan's charm cracked. His jaw tightened. "You think this ends with me?" Ethan stepped closer. "It ends with you admitting what you did." Ryan's hands trembled. "You can't prove." The doors burst open. Logan entered, followed by agents in black windbreakers marked FBI. Ryan barely moved as they cuffed him. He only glared at Ethan, eyes full of venom. "This isn't over." Ethan smiled coldly. It is for you. Outside, rain washed the city clean. Lila stood beneath the awning, head tilted back to the sky. For the first time in 2 years, she could breathe. Ethan joined her, silent at first. Then quietly, "It's over." Lila shook her head gently. "No, it's beginning." He turned toward her, that rare, honest smile curving his lips. "Then let's begin properly." Weeks passed. The headlines faded, but the story, their story, became legend. Ethan rebuilt his company stronger than before. Lila launched the Carter Foundation, dedicated to helping victims of financial fraud. Together, they became unstoppable partners in justice and in life. Late one night, standing on the balcony overlooking the glowing city, Ethan took her hand. "You know," he said softly, "when you slipped me that note in the restaurant, I thought you were saving me from espionage." Lila smiled. "I was." He looked at her, eyes warm. "No, you saved me from myself." The wind carried her laughter like music through the night. She turned, whispering, "And you gave me back my name." He pulled her close. Their foreheads touched, a quiet promise between two survivors who had lost everything except each other. The war for truth was over. But the story of Ethan Blackwell and Lila Carter had only just begun. A year had passed, but for Lila Carter, it felt like a lifetime reborn. The grand ballroom of Lernadan shimmered under chandeliers, the same restaurant where her story had begun, and tonight, where it would come full circle. She stood on the small stage, wearing a deep emerald gown that caught every flicker of light. Her voice was calm, strong, radiant with truth. "When I worked in this very room 2 years ago, I never imagined I'd one day stand here as your host, not your waitress." Laughter rippled warmly through the crowd. Investors, philanthropists, journalists, the city's elite gathered for the Carter Foundation's first annual gala. "In our first year," Lila continued, "we've recovered over 300 million in stolen assets, provided legal aid to 200 victims, and proven that justice delayed doesn't have to mean justice denied." Applause thundered. At the front table, Ethan Blackwell watched her with pride and quiet awe. To him, she wasn't the girl he'd rescued. She was the woman who had rebuilt everything and changed him forever. Later that night, as the last guests left, Lila lingered in the empty hall. Her heels clicked softly against the marble as she walked the room where everything began. Ethan joined her, 2 champagne flutes in hand. "Successful evening," he said, voice low and amused. "You were magnificent as always." She smiled. "Thank you." Then, after a pause, "It's strange. 2 years ago, I stood here afraid to look anyone in the eye. Now I'm planning global expansions." Ethan chuckled. "From waitress to world changer." She turned to him, expression softening. "And yet," she said quietly, "I can't help wondering why the man I love hasn't asked me to marry him yet." Ethan froze, then laughed, a rich, disbelieving sound. "Do you remember what you told me the night we met?" Lila frowned. "Which part?" "That getting involved with me was a terrible idea," he grinned. "You were right. It was absolutely catastrophic." Before she could respond, Ethan dropped to one knee. A small box appeared in his hand, the light catching on a diamond ring surrounded by emeralds. His voice trembled slightly, not with fear, but with feeling. "Lila Carter, the night you slipped me that note, you saved me from a life without purpose, without love, without you." He opened the box. You've already given me everything, a reason to fight, a cause to believe in. Now I want to make it forever. Will you marry me?" Lila gasped, laughter and tears colliding all at once. "Are you seriously proposing to me in the same restaurant where I used to serve you dinner? Is that a problem?" Ethan asked softly. She smiled through her tears. "It's perfect." She took his hands. "Of course I'll marry you." When he slipped the ring on her finger, the applause that followed wasn't from the crowd, it was the echo of every victory they'd fought for together. Scene 2. 6 months later, the music of a string quartet filled the air. A soft wind carried the scent of roses and champagne. Schloss Carter Estate, Vienna. The ancestral chapel gleamed with candlelight. Lila walked down the aisle, radiant in a gown once worn by her great-grandmother. At the altar waited Ethan Blackwell, in a morning coat of deep navy, his grey eyes bright, softened by wonder. Helena stood beside Lila as maid of honor, no longer haunted, but reborn as Chloe Hale, director of European operations for the Foundation. When the priest spoke, his voice echoed through the centuries. "Do you, Ethan Blackwell, take this woman, with everything I am?" Ethan interrupted softly. Laughter rippled through the chapel. Even the old walls seemed to smile. Then Lila spoke, her voice breaking only once. "You saw me when I was invisible. You believed me when the world didn't. You gave me back my name and my heart." The priest smiled. "Then I pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss was slow, gentle, and infinite, the kind of kiss that rewrote every broken chapter that came before. The dance. The grand ballroom glittered once more, filled with music, light, and laughter. As they danced, Lila whispered, "No regrets?" Ethan smiled. "Not one. Every mistake led me to you." He spun her once, the crowd fading to a blur of gold. "So what's next?" she asked. He smirked. "Oh, I have plans. The Foundation expands to Asia next year, and after that, maybe a seat on the UN Human Rights Council." Lila laughed. "Ambitious as ever." He leaned closer, his voice low. "And after that, children. A legacy." Her eyes sparkled. "One thing at a time, Mr. Blackwell." He kissed her forehead. "Fine, but I plan to spend the rest of my life changing the world with you." The camera would have pulled back here, rising above the glittering ballroom, over the castle's glowing windows, until the stars themselves reflected the lights below. Two souls who had everything taken and gave the world something greater in return: truth, justice, and love. The music swelled strings, piano, rain, and memory. And beneath it all, Ethan's voice whispered softly against her ear. "The night you warned me, you didn't just save my life, you became it." 1 year later, the world had changed, and so had they. The Carter Blackwell Foundation now stood at the heart of Manhattan, a glass tower built on the ashes of everything that once broke them. On its facade, in quiet silver letters, two names stood side by side: Ethan Blackwell and Lila Carter. Inside, reporters filled the press hall as Lila stepped onto the stage. She wore a white suit, elegant, timeless, the symbol of a woman who had survived every storm. "When we founded this organization," she began, "it wasn't about revenge. It was about rebuilding trust in a world that profits from lies." Her voice carried through the room, calm, grounded, unshakable. "A year ago, I was the story. Today, we give thousands of others the power to write their own." Applause rose like thunder, but behind the cameras, Ethan stood quietly watching her. Every word she spoke reminded him why he had fallen in love. She didn't just rebuild her life, she built a legacy. That evening, the two of them stood on the rooftop garden of the tower. The city pulsed below, alive with lights and dreams. Ethan handed her a glass of wine. "To survival," he said. She smiled. "To purpose." They clinked glasses, the sound soft and pure. "I've been invited to Geneva," she added. "The United Nations wants to fund the Foundation's international program. They want me to speak about ethical finance reform." Ethan grinned. "Looks like you're going global." She looked at him sideways. "We are going global," he chuckled. "You never let me rest, do you? Not when there's still injustice in the world." They laughed, quiet and tender. The kind of laughter that only comes from peace, hard-earned. Later that night, under the warm hum of city lights, Ethan opened a small leather notebook, his father's. Inside were scribbles from years ago, formulas, plans, and a single line written in ink: "Build something that outlives you." He closed the book and looked at Lila. "I think I finally understand what he meant." She tilted her head. "What?" "It wasn't about buildings. It was about people." She smiled softly. "You already have. You built us." He took her hand, fingers intertwining, strong, steady, and in that moment, silence said everything. Weeks later, Geneva. The conference hall shimmered with diplomats, world leaders, and scholars. Banners read, "Global Ethics Summit, the new era of accountability." Lila stood at the podium, lights dimmed, cameras rolling. "Once, I believed power meant control. But true power is responsibility. It's choosing to stand up when you've been broken and to help others rise with you." Behind her, the world map lit up dots, marking every branch of the Carter-Blackwell Foundation across 6 continents. Ethan watched from the front row, pride glowing behind quiet eyes. When she finished, the applause didn't stop for minutes. Even the interpreters paused mid-sentence, lost in the emotion of her words. Later, outside the conference, a journalist approached them. "Mrs. Blackwell," she said, "you've gone from scandal to symbol of hope. What's next for you two?" Lila looked at Ethan, then back at the cameras. "We're not here to be remembered," she said. "We're here to make sure others are never forgotten." That night, they walked along Lake Geneva moonlight, spilling across the water, soft wind carrying the sound of laughter from distant cafes. Lila leaned against his shoulder. "Do you ever miss the old life?" Ethan shook his head. "No. The old life was survival. This is living." She smiled, closing her eyes as he kissed her hair. Their reflections shimmered together across the water, 2 souls no longer running, but walking side by side toward everything still unwritten. "Ethan? Do you ever wonder how different things could have been if I hadn't warned you that night?" He smiled, voice deep, tender. "Then I suppose the world would have lost its bravest woman." She laughed softly. "And you would have kept your empire." He looked at her. "I'd rather have you." The sky deepened into midnight blue. The lights of Geneva reflected like stars below their feet. And as the music swelled, strings rising, piano trembling, his voice whispered one last line, the same words he told her long ago. "The night you warned me, you didn't just save my life. You became it." 2 years after Geneva, the world remembered their names not as scandal, but as symbols of courage, love, and rebirth. The Carter-Blackwell Institute for Ethics and Innovation had grown beyond what even they imagined. Branches in 30 countries, thousands of lives rebuilt, millions inspired. But with greatness comes the weight of legacy. Lila stood in the lecture hall of Harvard University. Before her hundreds of students, journalists, and young founders. The air was thick with anticipation. She smiled, the same calm grace she carried even in chaos. "People often ask," she said, "what does it feel like to be redeemed?" A soft pause. "The truth is, redemption isn't a moment. It's a choice you make every single day, to live without bitterness, to forgive what still hurts, to build when others only destroy." Her voice trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from memory. Ethan watched from the back row, his pride quiet, almost invisible. He never interrupted her light. He only made sure it had room to shine. When she finished, the crowd rose to their feet. Applause, tears, hope. Later, in the evening, they walked along the Charles River, wind brushing the water into soft silver ripples. Lila leaned into him. "Do you ever think we did enough?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Enough isn't in our vocabulary." She laughed, the sound that once healed him. "But sometimes I worry that we gave too much." He looked at her eyes, thoughtful, gentle. "You can't give too much when what you're giving is meaning." Silence. Then she whispered, "We should slow down." He stopped walking. "You mean, leave it behind?" "No," she said softly. "I mean, pass it on." Months later, they did. The foundation launched the Next Generation Fellowship, a program to train young leaders, activists, and dreamers. Its first class came from 30 countries. Ethan and Lila greeted each one personally. Among them was a girl 16, shy, holding a worn envelope with trembling hands. She looked at Lila, eyes wide. "My mother said you helped her get justice," she said. "She told me to give you this." Lila opened the envelope. Inside, a simple note written in careful handwriting. "Because of you, my daughter believes the world is good again." Lila couldn't speak. Ethan just placed a hand on her back, anchoring her in that quiet flood of emotion. Years passed. Their work became movement. Their story became legacy. But at home, in their quiet townhouse overlooking the East River, they lived simply. No boardrooms, no headlines, just books, laughter, and the small rhythm of ordinary life. One night, as thunder rolled beyond the window, Ethan sat by the fire, reading from an old journal. "What are you reading?" Lila asked. "Your first letter to the foundation," he said, smiling. "You wrote, 'May this work never be about us, but about everyone who still believes in second chances.'" She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I meant it." He kissed her hair. "I know. That's why it worked." As the firelight flickered, Lila whispered, "Ethan, what do you think comes after legacy?" He smiled, the same calm, steady smile she fell in love with years ago. "Peace," he said, "and maybe a little quiet." She laughed softly. "You? Quiet?" He grinned. "All right, peace, with a touch of chaos." The rain eased outside. The city lights shimmered through the mist. Their silhouettes glowed against the warm orange firelight, two souls who had fought every storm and found their forever after, not in triumph, but in tenderness. "The night you warned me," Ethan murmured, "you changed everything, but every day after that you made life worth it." Lila smiled, eyes glistening. "And every day since, you reminded me why I chose to live." They sat in silence. The rain faded. The fire whispered. And somewhere beyond the walls, the city breathed strong, alive, unbroken.